Alrighty. Good evening, Jones community. Welcome to our Jones Community Forum with our focus on safety here at Jones. Tonight, next slide, please. Tonight, we would like to provide you with some information about a more holistic approach to safety and the development of our whole school safety plan. Tonight, we'd also like to provide some clarity around school resource officers and some alternative options. And lastly, we would like to hear some questions or concerns or suggestions about safety here at Jones. I am Mr. Eric Mitchell. I'm one of the assistant principals here, and I am one of the whole school safety plan committee members, and have a few others here with me. Rachel, would you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Rachel Zen. I am one of the members of the Jones Local School Council. I'm a community rep on the LSC. And I'll pass it to Daniel.
Hi, good evening. My name is Daniel Andrade. I am a student rep on the whole school safety committee, and I'm the next year's student elected representative.
Hi,
I'll pass it on to Ms. Logan.
And I can say a couple of words really quickly about translation.
Hello, I'm Ms. Lalagian. I'm CS teacher at Jones.
All right. I did want to say really quickly, si usted está viendo esta presentación ahorita, vamos a presentarla en inglés, pero vamos a poner una traducción de esta presentación en el sitio de web de Jones después de esta noche. Así que si usted puede verla después, vamos a poner una versión en español y además vamos a traducir toda la información de esta presentación en español y vamos a traducir una encuesta para padres para que ustedes puedan tomar tiempo para enviar mensajes o ideas, preocupaciones, preguntas, dudas sobre la protección escolar de Jones y sobre los oficiales de la policía en las escuelas de CPS. So if you are watching this now, we are going to translate the forum into Spanish and into Mandarin, and we're going to also translate the parent survey that we've sent out into those two languages as well.
Thank you, Rachel. So as I said, we'd like to kind of get started by sharing, what we're up to, how we got to this point. So next slide, please. So to get to this whole school safety plan, Chicago Public School System had worked with some community-based organizations to generate recommendations, because a year ago we were making a and/or decision as it relates to our school resource officer program. And so 1 year later, we are still making that decision, but it has expanded. And so that's going to be part of our conversation today. In line with CPS's Healing Centered Initiative framework, the community members were asked to develop a holistic recommendation that extended beyond physical safety to include emotional safety and relational safety. So as you see by those three circles. Next slide. So just a clearer picture, our whole school safety plan will integrate these three components. So there is the component that references the school resource officers and their usage, but we'll also be looking at social emotional needs of students and building relational trust between students, students and teachers, teachers and administration, and the entire community. Next slide. Rachel, do you want to take this slide?
Sure. So what is a whole school safety plan? A whole school safety plan is a new approach to school safety that CPS created this year after partnering with those community organizations that Mr. Mitchell was talking about. And the goal of the whole school safety plan is to move toward and uplift a holistic approach to school safety that takes into consideration not only physical safety, but also emotional safety and relational trust as well. This is different from, for example, the decision on school resource officers that local school councils were asked to make last summer. Rather than just making a decision about school resource officer programs in schools, the whole school safety plan is anticipated to incorporate or hopes to incorporate reviews other safety strategies as well, alternative safety strategies or additional safety strategies to those that are already being implemented by the school. And this plan is going to be created and is being created by whole school safety committees across the city at each school, at each high school with school resource officers. And this committee is made up of school administration, such as principals. It's made up of students at the school, teachers at the school, as well as community members of the school as well, such as myself. And we are working with a template for the plan that CPS has provided each school, and that our task is to fill out the template according to what we hear from the school community about school safety.
Thank you, Rachel. Also, one of our stakeholders are parents as part of the community that are a part of our committee, as well. So did want to add that. Next slide, please. So there are some basic steps for us to complete this plan. As Rachel mentioned, we do have a template that CPS has kind of provided all the schools from which to follow. But here are the basic steps that we're taking. Step one was to establish a committee, which we have done, and the development of a whole school safety vision statement that has been completed within committee. We hope to be sharing that in the near future. In this process, we are assessing what's from a safety perspective, our strengths and opportunities by using school data and feedback. Henceforth, why we're having this session today, to get some additional feedback from you all. While we're doing this, we're concurrently identifying priorities in the three areas that we mentioned: physical safety, emotional safety, and relational trust. And from the priorities that we have developed, we're going to outline additional interventions and resources that are needed to address these priorities. And last but not least, we will be providing a recommendation for our school resource officer program. Next slide. Rachel.
So there are a number of questions that you may have that I had too regarding the school resource officer program. And so what this slide delineates is three options. So what happens if my school already voted to remove school resource officers in 2020? That is not the case for Jones, but the 17 schools that did vote to remove SROs will be given resources for alternative safety programs, but it won't be similar to the resources that schools will get if they choose to remove one or both of their resource officers. And so what the second option is, what if the school votes to retain both SROs? And in this case, what if the whole school safety plan recommends that both SROs are kept at the school. In that case, no additional resources will be given to the schools for alternative safety programs. And then finally, what if my school votes to remove one or both of the SROs? CPS has said that they will provide $50,000 at least per resource officer that is quote unquote traded in. And this will be an annual allotment. And after the first year, this money, if it's $50,000 for one officer or $100,000 for two, will be integrated into the school's budget.
Next slide. So what's the big difference? Daniel, you had some input. You wanted to share information about this slide?
Yes, so the main difference are all here as shown. As you can see, there are major differences between school resource officers and CPS security officers. Those are the main people that we have in as an idea of guarding our school. School resource officers are full-time, they're armed with guns, they're in uniform, and they're employed by the Chicago Police Department. Jones has two SROs, and both of them are new to the school this year. It's Ida Perez and Isagani Peralta. They are not required to take school-specific training, though this has been proposed, but it is available to them. And this is where the differences start to get really important. So they can go beyond school grounds. This means that Jones is near the red line. They can go and investigate anything that occurs in the red line, or beyond school grounds in different streets and a few blocks away from the school. And they also have access to CPD backup. So they have access to call for backup on their radios, as opposed to the school calling 911 and having to go through an operator. Jones has 9 security guard officers who are civilians employed by CPS. And as of 2 years ago, security officers are vetted by the Office of Safety and Security and not by the school. And they undergo training programs such as sex abuse prevention, LGBTQ policies, implicit bias, and safety care. Now, I also wanted to give some input on student perspectives that students believe that CPS security officers can do what school resource officers can. And that means there is no need for school resource officers, but that's not necessarily the case because, as I said, school resource officers can go beyond school grounds and have access to immediate backup. And there's also a third alternative, part-time off-duty police officers. These are used by different schools across the city that we'll go into a little later, but they're part-time off-duty Chicago police officers who are employed by CPS, not CPD. And it's unclear at the moment if part-time CPS police officers have to undergo CPS safety and security programs that CPS security officers do. And they typically work flexible hours. They're mainly used at like dismissal and entrance times and night events.
Thank you, Daniel. Just to add a little bit more to what he was saying, the two school resource officers that he mentioned have undergone the new school resource officer training that CPD had put in place. And one of them has actually been a school resource officer at an elementary school previously. So just some specific information pertaining to the two school resource officers that are currently just scheduled to be at Jones. Additionally, there are a couple of our peer schools, at least one peer school that we are aware of that utilizes off-duty police officers. It is something that we have not really truly considered, but we're exploring as a committee. So to put that out there as well. Next slide. So just to kind of clarify a little bit between our security team members and our SROs in terms of daily operations at Jones, we'd like to think about our security team members working inside out, meaning that their responsibilities are to provide physical safety to students by monitoring entrance and exits. They are seen, walking the halls and observing lunchrooms. The security camera system that we have, they monitor that. and they are responsible for our securing our after school activities and sporting events. So currently, Jones's operational hours are roughly 6 a.m. when we have morning practices and things of this nature to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday. And so we have 9 security team members that stagger in schedule between 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. So in the early hours, we have 2 to 3. And in the wee hours of the afternoon or evening, we have 2 or so. But during the school day, when students are present, when the most students are present, we have about 6 that are available to support our students and secure the building. Next slide. Our school resource officers on the contrary work on the outside in. They help secure the outside perimeter of the school. So for example, we have off-campus lunch, and while the students are out in the community, they can be out making sure that things are safe for them during lunch. They also help monitor entrance and exits, excuse me. And in the morning, they are part of our morning routine in terms of welcoming students and checking in IDs as students come in the building. And then the evenings, providing safe passage to students by being present at busy intersections and being nearby red line and bus stops. Our SROs support students from roughly 7:30 to 3:30 is the time frame that they are around the school. So just wanted to put that out there as some of the subtle differences between our school resource officers and our security team members. Next slide. Rachel, do you want to address this?
Sure. So one of the options that's on the table for the whole school safety committee is to make a recommendation to remove either one or both of the school resource officers, as we have said. And one of the questions that might come up, that is a great question, is, well, if we're given this money to spend, what alternatives are there for schools to look at and to fund with this money? So here are 4 options and these are all pulled from what CPS has shared so far. I do want to note that this is the first time CPS is providing schools with this sort of money for this particular purpose, and so this is all kind of new. But 4 alternatives, is, for example, implementing restorative justice practices such as peace rooms and peace circles. And the action item for that would be to hire a full-time restorative justice coordinator. Another alternative is to increase access to mental health resources. And this could be done by hiring additional counseling staff at the school. Another alternative is to implement professional development around de-escalation training. And that would be funded through the funds that CPS has offered in replacement for SROs, for example. And then one final alternative is to provide trauma-informed crisis intervention. And that would be funded by the funds that's being offered by CPS to fund a new trauma-informed counseling program. There are other alternatives on the table, I do want to say, and there are alternatives that schools have implemented that we're not considering the SRO decision or SRO program, but have implemented them kind of separately. And so we don't have to limit ourselves as a committee or as a school when we're thinking about alternatives to school safety.
Thank you for adding that. Additionally, these alternatives are suggestions based upon the priorities or needs that we determine as a school. So just making the connection. So we have identified our priorities as a school, and then some things that we do currently, and then the additional alternatives that we can add to better implement the safety plan. So I just want to add that. Next slide. So we mentioned earlier a couple of our peer schools. And so as you can see here, Walter Payton does have off-duty police officers part-time, as well as security guards. And to make note, they are not in uniform and they don't have guns. And it says here no radios, but I'm sure they have to have some level of communication. I guess that means no radios with CPD at that time. Additionally, Lane Tech, who voted to end their SRO program last year, installed more than 100 cameras on campus, which was an increase from the 25 that they have. Just so that for scale, at Jones, we have about 100 or so cameras between the two buildings that are positioned, mostly position cameras for around the campus. If that was an option, we would look to get better exterior cameras, because there are some areas that could improve with another camera or so. And then last note, there are 17 schools that ended their SRO program last year that weren't given their resources, as Rachel mentioned earlier. So next slide. Rachel, you want to attack this one, or you want me to?
No, I can definitely take it. So this whole school safety planning process is not meant to be a one-time situation, a one-time conversation. It's meant to be similar to the continuous improvement work plan, for example, for every school. It's supposed to be a living, breathing plan. And so this first convening of the whole school safety committee is to establish the proposed plan, or to come up with a plan and propose it to the local school council. Once we have a plan ready to present to the council, the council will actually have a vote on the plan, and the council will either vote to approve the plan or ask the whole school safety committee to collaborate more. And that's something that will happen after the plan is presented, no later than June 14th. LSCs have been asked by CPS to conduct their vote on whole school safety plans no later than July 14th. As we have discussed as a committee and at the local school council meeting yesterday, hopefully this vote will happen before July 14th, in the case that there's recommendations around staffing that requires hiring, for example. So definitely not seeing that as the time to hold the vote from the committee's perspective, but hopefully sooner. And so then next spring, schools will reconvene their whole school safety committees and basically ask, is it working, or what's working and what's not working? How can we revise it? Does it still fit the school? And depending on the answers to those questions, the schools will update their whole school safety plans. And then next summer, local school councils will review the plans again. And then over the following school year, the plan will be implemented. And that's going to be happening annually, essentially. And so this is not just, we're not, starting and ending the conversation this summer, but rather the intention is to continue the conversation into the future annually, just to assess what's working, what's not. And yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. One piece that's highlighted at the bottom that we definitely want to make note is if a decision is made to remove our school resource officer program, whether it's one or both, we will not have the ability to restore those positions in the future. So that is the heavy lift, or the heavy decision that we're looking for as much input as possible to make. So there are so many moving pieces that we're doing concurrently with the development of this school safety plan, with this decision to, whether or not we want to keep the SROs program in total with both of them, if we want to keep one, or if we choose to rid the school of it. Those are all kind of, intertwined. So the committee is committed to, listening and getting as much feedback from you all as possible, so that we can make the best decision to support our students and staff in terms of whole safety, not just the physical, but the emotional, and really building on that relational trust aspect as well. Looks like Troy, is this our last slide? So we're at this point where we're opening the floor to some questions, and I see that there are a couple. One question is, what research evidence is the whole school safety committee utilizing on the benefits and drawbacks of police in schools to create their plan? And so we're using an array of data. There was data that was provided towards the end of last school year in terms of like crime in the area, and we're actually looking to request an update from that data. And we've also been using some survey data. We've been using the 5 essential survey data that was last utilized. I think it's the 2019. So we're using multiple data points. We're also using qualitative data. There have been conversations throughout the course of this year about what is needed at the school, not just the pros and cons of police, but or police presence, but what alternatives. So we're taking all those things into consideration. And there's an additional question about, do SROs wear body cameras? The last 2 did. So, and that was when the program was implemented. So I would believe that the answer would still be yes, that they would be wearing body cameras. Rachel.
And I do want to just say, so we are looking at data, and I think the committee definitely could look at some research that's external to the data that we're pulling, not only from the community, but also from inside the school. And so research that's been done across a variety of schools, that's something that we should look at. And I appreciate the question because we haven't done that yet. And so, yeah, that's definitely on the docket, I would say.
Yep, great question. This is why we're having the forum, because there are things that we may not have thought of. And so the more feedback and questions and comments that we get, the better a decision we can make. Any additional questions coming, Troy? Okay. No additional questions. There were 3 questions that were sent to us prior to the meeting. I'm gonna pull those up real quick. Oh, the chat was disabled. We'll give it a minute. It looks like we're having maybe a couple of difficulties with the chat and people's ability to communicate via the chat. Okay, looks like we're having some technical difficulties with the chat. So what we can do is Mr. Hilbrand provided a form prior to this forum where you could drop questions, comments, or concerns. And so we'll make that form available again and collect your questions, comments, and concerns. And if possible, we will maybe set up another forum where we can actually address those questions. Because we do want to hear from you all as a community. We're getting bits and pieces, and as we shared, we have kind of a tight, timetable. But it's so we want to make sure we give enough time to collect this information. So I think that's what we'll do is make sure that the form that was posted on the website will get posted on the website again, and we can also email it out to families that may have wanted to comment or had questions pertaining to what we shared with you all today. But we wanted to keep you guys informed. This is an important decision, important discussion to have, and we appreciate having this opportunity as a committee to make the best decisions on behalf of all stakeholders. So any other comments that any other committee member wants to make at this time? Because if the chat is disabled and we are not have the ability to have questions, then I think that we might just have to end our community forum a little earlier.
I did want to ask, Daniel, do you want to share out a little bit of the information shared at the student forum from last week?
Yes, I can share it. So like last week, Wednesday as well, around this time we had a student forum with the same information as here, but we also gave a chance for students to get into breakout rooms and communicate amongst themselves to see what they thought about SROs and the whole school safety plan. And we got a lot of information back from them. Keep in mind, this was a small group of students, so they don't speak for the whole school, but it does give us a good idea of what we were thinking. And so, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of students get confused and think that that the security officers can do what SROs do. However, like I said earlier, there are some major differences. Another thing is that SROs are armed, and that triggers a lot of students. That makes them feel unsafe. So part of whole school safety is that emotional safety aspect. So that kind of gets compromised by SROs concerning students. But other than that, students are kind of on the fence as well, but a majority of them think that SROs shouldn't be in school. But that's information we got from the forum, and then we also sent a survey out similar to the ones we got from parents. And in that survey, the majority of students also said no SROs. Yes.
Thank you for that update, Daniel. If we failed to mention it, we do have 2 surveys out to students and to parents right now. Those surveys do emphasize more thoughts and feelings about physical safety because we're really trying to get at people's thoughts and opinions around the need for SROs. But through our presentation today, we wanted you to see that our whole school safety plan isn't just about that physical safety. We are looking at ways to better address students' social emotional needs and levels of trust between students and teachers, between students and administrators. So, really our whole school culture and climate. So we wanted to make sure that you all as a community were aware, of kind of the big picture. So again, since we don't seem to have the ability to collect those questions through the chat, I think our best alternative is to make sure we have a form available to kind of capture your questions and your feedback. And we will, definitely keep you guys abreast of where we are. We'll update you. We'll have to figure out the best way to do that. One last point, our we will be sending out a teacher survey as well. So just to make you all aware, we are getting feedback from as many stakeholders as possible. Daniel, you have one more comment you want to make?
Yes, and so before this committee, there was also a safety and security committee that was also tasked with finding information on SROs, and I was a part of that committee as well. And so we also have that information. However, this was before schools knew that they were going to get additional funding. Back then, it was under the information that we wouldn't be getting any funding, and it would just be the SROs would be cut. So we have that data to kind of like represent what has changed in the school. So keep in mind that we have that as well.
Thank you, Daniel. One last stakeholder I forgot to mention that is a part of the conversation. We do have 2 security team member representatives who are also part of the committee providing feedback and their perspective as relates to safety in the building. So again, I think at this time we'll kind of conclude our presentation and get that form out to you all. We thank those of you who were able to be present for this session. Hopefully you found it informative, and we apologize for not being able to capture your feedback immediately, but we still want to get it. So make sure when you get that link to that form that you do fill it out and hit submit. All right. Any other comments? Otherwise, good night, everyone.